more Barnstable this morning. I'm Sarah Colvin, and joining me live on the phone, I welcome our Director of Finance, Mark Milne. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, Sarah.
How are you today?
Pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Beautiful weather out there and lots to talk about.
Can't believe it's November.
I know. We like it. We'll keep it. It can stay like this for forever, as far as I'm concerned. So, Mark, a big night for you and Director of Assessing, Jeff Rudziak, on Thursday. Tomorrow, it's the annual tax classification presentation. Let's talk a little bit about what that entails.
Sure. Every year, the Town Council has to make some decisions as to how to allocate the tax levy between the property classes. The decisions they make will not affect the total amount of the tax levy that's being raised. Rather, the decisions will only impact how to, if at all, they want to shift any of a portion of that levy from one class to another class, or in some cases within or between taxpayers within a class. For example, the residential exemption, that particular tax levy shifting option allows the town to shift a portion of the residential tax levy to secondary homeowners from the primary homeowners. And so people who have Barnstable listed as their primary residence will save some money on their tax bill as it gets shifted, more of the tax levy gets shifted to the second homeowners, as well as primary homeowners in Barnstable who have a home valued at a certain dollar amount. And so the tax benefit from that particular shifting option actually decreases as a person's home moves up on the assessed value scale.
Sure, and that's something that we have voted on for many years now, and that's been in place, again, benefiting those year-round homeowners and more so in the lower end of the real estate market.
Yes, it's been in place for about 10 years now. The council has consistently adopted a 20% residential exemption for that time period. And due to the progressive nature of the tax, it does provide primary residents in Barnstable with the lower assessed property values a much higher tax benefit than those on the upper scale of the assessed value. So again, as that the home value increases, the tax benefit decreases. So due to the progressive nature of how the tax shift works.
Indeed, and so that's one part of the discussion. Anything else about that tax shift that you think people should be aware of, Mark?
Well, in regards to that specific tax shift, it's important for people to check their tax bill when they receive it to make sure that if they are a primary resident, that they receive the residential exemption. If they don't have it on their tax bill, if they don't see that exemption on their tax bill, and that's if the council adopts it now, to go to the assessor's office and file for an abatement to qualify for that residential exemption. They will have to provide some documentation proving that they are a resident. This is their primary residence, and it's usually a copy of the front page of their federal tax filing form showing their Barnstable address as the place from which they file their taxes. And Social Security numbers and income numbers can be blacked out. We don't need to see those, but we need to see that they're filing from this specific town as their primary resident.
And is that something that folks have to file for every year, or is it something that you just need to do when you purchase a home?
Right, only when you purchase the home. And once you receive the exemption, you're in the assessor's records as getting it every year. And the way the assessing department keeps that file updated is that they receive a copy of every real estate transaction that takes place within the town of Barnstable from the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds. And so people are buying and selling homes in Barnstable, they're going to update their files accordingly. So anytime somebody comes in and buys a home in Barnstable, the assessor's office will send them a form asking them to complete and submit certain paperwork in order to qualify for the residential exemption to prove that this is going to be their primary residency and not a second or third or fourth home, whatever it might be for them. So yeah, that's something that you file for once, you qualify for it, and then you will receive it. However, what the difficult part is that if the person this is the person's primary residence for a number of years, and then they decide to buy, let's say, a house in Florida, and they move to Florida and they file for Florida residency, but yet they keep their house in Barnstable here, they will lose the exemption.
Right.
And so we do have Florida. Anytime somebody does something like that, states like Florida will call us and contact our assessing office to find out whether or not they're a primary resident here in Barnstable, and that's how we catch transactions like that. Is we have to communicate with assessor's office in other states,
right,
to catch things like that. But we don't know if somebody's buying a house in Florida necessarily. So we depend upon other states, government operations to communicate with us.
Indeed, and I would think somewhere like Florida, just like here in Barnstable, has a high percentage of second homeowners
Yes.
that are doing things like that. So.
And that's where we see a lot of it from. That's usually where we get most of our contact is in the state of Florida.
Great. So moving on from the residential exemption, what's the next portion of the presentation?
The other tax shifting option that the town council will consider is whether or not to adopt a minimum residential factor of less than 1, or more commonly referred to as a split tax rate between residential property and commercial, industrial, and personal property. The council does have the option to shift or to make the tax rate for the commercial, industrial, and personal property class 1.5 times higher than the residential class. And so what that does, by doing that kind of shift, it moves a significant portion of the tax levy from the residential class to that commercial, industrial, and personal property class. But the challenge with that tax shift for us in the town of Barnstable is that we are predominantly a residential community, meaning that about 88% of our total town property value is comprised of residential property and only 12% commercial, industrial, and personal property. So if we were to adopt a shift like that, the tax benefit to the residential class is nominal, but the impact to the commercial, industrial, and personal property class is substantial. So there's a very small benefit to the residential class, but a very large tax increase to the commercial, industrial, and personal property class. And so the council has consistently not adopted a factor of 1, meaning that the tax rates between those classes will be the same.
Indeed, I think we'd hear a lot of noise from the business community if that split tax was adopted, especially as you just explained, the big difference between the two.
Yeah, and usually you see this type of shift take place in communities that have a higher percentage of commercial property within their borders. And actually, one of our fire districts actually adopted a shift, and that's the Hyannis Fire District, and which makes more sense for them because they have a very large portion of their tax levy within that district is made up of the commercial type of property. Obviously, being in the commercial center of Barnstable or in Cape Cod, for that matter, it makes more sense for them to do that. And the tax benefit from to the residential properties within that district is greater, and the detriment to the commercial class is less. There's less of an impact to them as a result of because you can share it across many more properties.
Indeed. So if every village in Barnstable had a commercial center as dense as Hyannis, it might be something to consider. But of course, with Hyannis being the one village that really has the majority of the commercial property and everyone else being more primarily residential,
right,
it certainly makes more sense to even it out a little bit.
Yeah, and you'll see, you can go on the state's website and you can see the communities who actually adopt a split tax rate, and you'll see that all those communities which adopt it have a significantly higher percentage of commercial, industrial, and personal property within their town borders than Barnstable does.
Indeed. Mark, I know that the assessing division is recently completed or is on the way to completing the revaluation of the town properties. How is that revaluation? I understand the values are going up. How's that going to affect the taxes for the coming fiscal year?
Yeah, it's a good question. And what this does is actually, because of the increase in the townwide property value, we're seeing about a 3.5% increase townwide in the town's property value, and about a 3.5% increase in the tax levy. So when you have both going up at the same percentage rate like that, the impact on the tax rate is nominal. So we actually see an increase in the tax rate of 1 cent this year.
Wow.
And so that's because as the tax levy goes up 3.5%, property values went up correspondingly 3.5%. So there's basically no change in the tax rate. So it doesn't, even though there's no change in the tax rate, doesn't mean your tax bill's going to stay the same because your property value went up.
Right. So if the property value could stay the same, the tax rate's going to go up, but the property value is going up, the tax rate stays the same, but it still means the bill's going to increase a little bit.
Yeah, it still means the bill is going to increase. So, for example, if the council were to adopt a 20% residential exemption and no split tax rate like they have, we're looking at a residential tax rate that's going to go to $9, from $9.30 to $9.31, and the increase in the tax bill, the annual tax bill for a median home in Barnstable will be $67, or a little bit more than $5 a month.
Indeed. So not a huge deal. So, Mark, anything else about the presentation that you and Jeff Rudziak will be making this Thursday that you think people should be aware of?
Yeah, there's one other small option to consider, and that's the small commercial exemption, and we'll be presenting that Thursday night as to how that works and how it doesn't work. It's not really well-crafted legislation. It does allow us to shift a portion of the tax levy within the commercial class from qualifying properties to non-qualifying properties, but the benefit goes to the property owner and not the business necessarily. So it's not very well-crafted legislation. It doesn't necessarily benefit the small business person, but we'll be covering that Thursday night as well.
Exactly. So the presentation will be made this week, and then the next meeting, Town Council will vote on it, or will they vote this week?
They will vote on it at their next meeting on the 19th. This meeting will just be to present how all of these tax shifting options will affect the tax levy between classes and the tax rates. And so we'd like to give them a couple weeks because it's a lot of information. Give them a couple of weeks to absorb that information, ask questions about that information before they make their decisions. So the final decision will be made on the 19th, assuming we actually have final certification of our revaluation, because like you mentioned earlier, we did a town-wide property revaluation this year. Exactly. And we expect to have that by the end of this week, so we don't consider that to be a problem.
Wonderful. Well, Mark, I thank you so much as always for joining us, and we will check in with you again next week. Have a great day.
You too, Sarah. Thanks.
All right, bye-bye. Bye. Mark Milne, of course, is our Director of Finance, joining us always.